feel the energy in the room there, couldn't you? It was spoken so passionately. Do you know what? I hadn't heard that before. I didn't know what was going to come out of your mouth, Rory. But I felt like that you could have been reading my testimony there. Do you know? Because, like, I remember, as I said earlier on, I studied criminology later in life. One of the teachers, one of the lecturers knew about my background, you know? And she introduced me to literature around children of imprisoned parents. I didn't even know this was a thing. And I started reading about that stuff. And when I was in secondary school, I just went from 6th class into first year. My dad got a sentence that time, you know, and I was very close to my dad. And I was always very bright at school, but the behavioural issue started for me then. And I couldn't concentrate in the class. I was getting caught up in a lot of misbehaving, and I was just put outside the door, suspended, expelled, and just made you feel like you're stupid or you're not worthy, you know. And it's only years later when I was reading about that, and I was like, if the teachers had the time to ask what was going on at home, my behaviour was actually very understandable if they took the time to think about the context I was coming from, you know. But there's loads of children like that, there's loads of prisoners in prison now that have backgrounds like ours, you know. And the social studies piece as well. When my dad was in prison, he did Open University social policy and criminology in the training unit, and my mum was doing a community development degree in CIT. So those books then became around the house, and I went away and I studied both at bachelor's and master's levels, you know. So we're very much influenced by our parents. But when I started learning about social stratification, I remember I started learning about Pierre Bourdieu and different forms of capital, and start joining the dots, then things start make sense. And then you think, like, it's not my mum and dad's fault at all. It's not my fault. Maybe we're not bad. Maybe there's structural forces at play that, you know, contribute to Knocknaheany's reputation, Moy Ross and Darndale. You know, so education was, you know, like a personal development tool for me.
For me, education from day one was not something that sat with me very well. I went through the education system until the age of 36, being undiagnosed with dyslexia. And in primary school, it was more or less kept at the back of the class or outside the principal's office. You know, back then I suppose nobody knew anything about learning differences and ADHD and all these different things. But today we've more of an understanding, but we still need to meet all those different areas as well with more education and more knowledge around it, and more know-how to work with these children that are growing up now today in our schools with all these different learning differences and these different issues that's going on for them in their lives. But when I did go back into education in prison, it was like going back to do the junior cert. Like, I knew the old lifestyle that I had before that, which was crime and drugs and everything else, wasn't something that was going to provide for me and my family anymore. So I knew I had to do something else, because I was starting to change my behaviours at this point. And I went through the prison education system, and I went out and I went into further education, you know. And when I went into third level education, I was in my second year and I applied for funding for an assessment. I got that assessment, and I had all these beliefs, core beliefs from a really young age, because of the way I was treated by certain teachers, even at home, because I wasn't able to do certain things, you know, at the table. And I had this belief that I was stupid, I was thick, I was different to everybody, and I felt so different. But when the assessment was completed and I was handed this piece of paper across the table by the educational psychologist, and she said, "You know what, Timmy, you're actually very, very intelligent." She said, "But you're dyslexic." And it was like, that was something I needed to hear. All these beliefs started just this drop. You know, I lost the belief that I was stupid. My results inside in college they were good, you know, and I started getting confidence in myself. And when I see my results consistent as well, and they were good grades, I was saying, you know what, I am actually well able. You know, I am well able, you know. And that's very important, you know. We have to look at our education system and see how we can help children, particularly growing up, and get these assessments so they can move forward, you know, and get an education to meet their ability and their needs, which I think is critical today. And we need to, as a society, we need to look at that in depth at the moment, because it's very, very important, because we have so many children slipping through the cracks in the education system, not going into school, going on the hop, getting involved in crime, taking drugs because they're bored, You know, but if they're getting the education to meet their needs and their ability, they're going to stay in school. Teachers have more of an understanding of them, and we need to educate our teachers well around this. So I think it's very, very, very important. We're here for a different reason today, but I think this is very important to mention as well, because this is a way of stopping these large numbers of men and women going into prisons. You know, and a lot of it is because they're uneducated and they don't understand, because they weren't able to get an education because the school didn't meet their needs. Or so
For those that did end up in prison, and some of those now might end up through the College Connect collaboration between the different universities, and you're breaking the cycle there so that their children, you know, education becomes a very normal thing to do. So that's brilliant, and we'd very much welcome that be rolled out nationally as well, especially Cork. Moving along, that was the first Cork plug. Now on there you have to do. Moving along, we've another video, and the video is produced by the Department of Justice, and it's around Bounce Back Recycling Social Enterprise in Galway, and there's normally some Galway representation here today. So listen, it's a great piece, and it's around, you know, recycling mattresses and employing people with the lived experience, you know, and having that pathway through to earning and being independent. So we'll just roll it there, Roisin.